sweating. We all do it. It's the reason why we take this hydration in our bottles on a ride. But it's not just something that we do. Sweat contains everything from DNA, cortisol, but most importantly, sodium. And the sodium is what we lose in our sweat that leaves the white marks on your cycling jersey or on the wetsuit when you're swimming. It's full of data, and this week I'm testing FlowBio's S1 for a training week to show the fluctuation in sodium concentration loss, to show how hydrating is not only key but how it can change depending on what you're doing and when you're doing it. So this is a little video taking a dive into the truth of sodium and sweating, so we can get the most what goes in your bottle and to understand what is right for you.
I'm lucky enough to be using the S1 from FlowBio, a state-of-the-art sweat monitoring device, changing the game so we no longer have the one-use sweat test. So what happens is, you sweat, you wear the device on your heart rate strap, your sweat enters the device through a little channel in the back, which then sends all the data to the app where it analyses it, and that's the data that we'll see.
Starting with today, 2 hour easy spin, not zone 2, that's going to be a different situation. It's an easy spin to take after some brunch. Nice and steady. If it goes up, the power goes up, that's how it is. So it'll be interesting to see the sodium rates today. And start of the week's training and comparing different sessions and how my sodium changes. So yeah, almost back now, and let's go and check out some numbers.
Sweat, you have lactate in sweat, you have cortisol in sweat. So sweat is a pretty sexy bodily fluid.
So 90 minutes in to an indoor zone 2 ride, top end zone 2, so sort of 5 to 10 watts below at tempo, like transfer line, collecting data on the S1 and yeah, analysing my sodium loss from sort of the baseline ride, and it'll give me a good idea of how much electrolytes I should be having in my bottles for, you know, these steadier longer rides. So yeah, interested to see this one. We've got the data from the interval session I've done, and I lose a lot more than I thought I do, and therefore not refueling sufficiently in terms of sodium. So yeah, a bit of a surprise, because I'm not an overly sweaty rider, so well, I didn't think I am, but turns out I am. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the results from this zone 2 baseline compared to the other rides, especially the zone 2 with 1 minute max efforts included. So yeah. So another day, another session. Indoors, the weather is brutal at the minute, so Storm Bert is taking its toll. So doing a low zone 2 indoor ride, but I'm also doing some other stuff. So I'm currently heat adapt training, not because I'm riding anywhere hot, just because I'm trying something. So yeah, it's warm. You know, riding indoors is warm anyway, but riding indoors in bib tights, long sleeve jersey and a jumper is even warmer. But it'll be interesting to see the sweat and see if it changes to riding heated. No fan, so really punishing myself, which is why it's a low zone 2. But yeah, so far the numbers have been fairly consistent. I'm sort of sitting around 1,500 milligrams for like 90 minutes. So yeah, for an hour, give or take. Like I've had a 90-minute ride zone 2, which was 1,890, I think, and I've had a 90-minute zone 2, which was 1,400 milligrams of sodium. So there is variation there, and from what I've found, I think looking back on those days, it was my hydration through the day that really set those apart. For all rides I've done, I've made sure I've had the same amount in my bottle. You know, sort of the hour leading up and then during the session. So things are consistent on that basis, because yes, the point of this is to make myself better, but at the same time I want to show how much, or if at all, it fluctuates, you know, within the week. So yeah, so there is some changes there. I'd done the interval session, which was tempo with 1 minute VO2s every sort of 10 minutes. That was an interesting one because I was expecting it to be a lot more, but again, it's around the 1,500 mark. So yeah, it's interesting because it does vary, but not as much as I was expecting between, you know, a solid zone 2 and a interval session. I've got a more intense interval session on early next week, and I'm also going to wear the S1 to the gym for a strength and conditioning session to see how it varies being off the bike. So yeah, there is fluctuation, and you know, I'll put overlays of the app data and stuff, and I'll kind of do a end of week summary, but it is changing, which I was kind of expecting, but not as much. It's not changing as much as I thought. So yeah, more of the story is I'm not hydrating enough, and I never have been, so that's going to change. Last session of the training week, I've headed up to Barnstable with Tristan and Simon. We just went up for an easy aerobic ride, like 3 hours, trying to avoid the rain. But yeah, so I've learned a lot from the fuel in and hydration. There's variation, but we'll break it down with the numbers near the end. But yeah, going to the end of a training week, strong week, looking at like a 15-hour week, so all good. So, it's the end of the training week. My week is done. It's just under 15 hours. It was a real mix. We had an interval session, 2 zone 2 rides, 1 heated, 1 normal, both indoor. We had an outdoor endurance ride of 4.5 hours, and I had a power test. So we'll start with the power test firstly.
So I did the full frontal Wahoo 4DP test. Indoors conditions were as good as I could make them, basically fan on, garage door open. And I sweated under a litre. Now this wasn't the first test. This wasn't the first time I used the sensor. So I'd used the S1 on an indoor zone 2 ride beforehand. So this, how this compares and my reaction to the first use with the S1 is, my reaction was very different. So, but I'm starting with this because this is kind of a good indicator of how much it changes, because that is the point of the video, to show how much, or if at all, your sodium concentration changes within a training week. Like those that saw the podcast, and there'll be a link in the description to the podcast where we had Stefan, the founder of FlowBio, come down, and he spoke about what can affect your sodium rate, and he goes into the science of what sodium is and what sweat is and what's in sweat a bit more. So definitely go and check that out if you haven't, because that will be a lot more scientific than I'm being. But yeah, so the power test, I lost just under 0.9 litres of sweat in an hour, which sounds a lot, like a litre of sweat, but I know for a fact I consumed a litre of electrolyte. 'Cause if I'm riding indoors, I always take my litre bottle. Yeah, so in that just under a litre, I lost 954 milligrams of sodium. Now, in my litre bottle, if I'm riding indoors, I have an SLTO7 1000 milligram from Sturka, so spot on, basically. I replaced what I lost, and that's good. That is positive. The first test I done was not so positive. So if we go to the Zone 2 non-heated ride, which is that one. So this was an hour Zone 2 ride. Again, garage open, fan on, nice and cool, in my Nopin Sub-Zero kit, chilling on Zwift at Zone 2. So I sweated 1.5 litres. So that's already like 500 mil more sweat in the same duration, which is bizarre considering the 4DP test contained a 20-minute threshold effort, which I PR'd on. Not the point of this, but I think that goes to show here what I learned from the first session with the SL1, because I was massively under. So on the first session, I lost 1,405 milligrams of sodium. Now, as I said, if I'm indoors, I have a 1,000 milligram Sturka tab. So, I mean, this session, as one example, I'm 400 milligrams short. That's almost a Sturka SLTO7 500 tab extra that I'm short per hour. And obviously, as Stefan said in the podcast, the longer you're in a sodium deficit, the worse it gets over durations of time. So, not good. And I learned from that, which is why after this first result, I hydrated better throughout the day, whether I was on and off the bike. I started having an electrolyte in the morning with my breakfast, and yeah, I made sure roughly I was having more in my bottle going into the turbo room. So then we'll move to the same ride, but indoor, but heated. So no fan. I did have the garage door open, but I was doing it in Nopin's Pro 1 Evo bib tights, base layer, jersey, hoodie, no fan. Now, this goes on to something that we're doing at the studio, on top of the sweat testing. to back this up and go with it. So I lost 2.1 litres of sweat. So that's 600 mil more sweat. Understandable, much hotter, 26 degrees roughly, whereas it was 22 degrees for the normal zone 2 once we kind of got going. So yeah, I sweated more. I mean, I was expecting that. I'm wearing a load of clothes, and that is kind of the point. So in that hour, I lost 1,005, well, just under 1,600 milligrams of sodium. So I'm still short, and the extra heat. The intensity was the same. The only changing factor was the temperature, and more importantly, my core body temperature, which I'll touch on again in a sec. So yeah, another 200 milligrams of sodium lost, which, I mean, considering I was already in a deficit, I'm now even more in a deficit. I'm almost a whole 1,000 milligram tab off of like replacing what I've lost. So this isn't just about performing, like hydrating to perform at my best. This is, affecting my day to day. So like headaches on the bike, muscle fatigue, cramps, these are all factors of dehydration. And dehydrating isn't just water. Like, growing up, my mum was one, oh, you're dehydrated, you need to drink more water. Pointless. There's no nutritional benefit, or very little nutritional benefit in water. It's electrolytes and what we lose in sweat that we need to replace to keep us hydrated. So that's sodium, potassium, magnesium. It's all in the podcast, and Stefan does a much better job of explaining it. But moral of the story is I'm short, so when I'm riding indoors, especially on a heater, I should almost be doubling what I'm having in my bottle. So moving on to an interesting one now, because so I've done an interval session. I'll fly through this one. So I've done an interval session. Tristan came out and done some filming for the sweat testing advert for the studio. That was 2-hour session. It was an hour of active recovery, zone 1. Every 10 minutes I done a 1-minute effort. And then it was an hour of chatting, zone 1, with 3 10-minute sprints and 3 sprints of like 10 seconds and a 30-second effort, just for some filming some bits, and the rest was all zone 1. So intensity wasn't overly high, but I lost 1.5 litres of sweat, and in that was 1,311 milligrams. So that was an easier session, and I'm still not hydrating enough. I was still behind by 300 milligrams. So I definitely need to up what I am having in my bottle. Now the interesting one here, so I done a 4.5 hour outdoor ride, and as you can see via the data, I only sweated 1.6 litres. Now this was a very easy ride in North Devon, and it was absolutely chucking it down and cold. As you can see, 13 degrees. But for a long duration, but really, really easy. So very little sweating, 1.5 litres. And in that, because I had 2 bottles with carb mix in, I also had 1,000 milligram tab in each bottle, because I knew I was behind on my sodium from other sessions. So I had 2,000 milligrams of sodium throughout those 4.5 hours. But I only lost 1,560. So whereas before I was having 500 milligram tabs in each bottle with my carb mix, that still wouldn't have been enough. So basically, moral of the story is I sweat more than I think. And even on long rides like this where I barely sweat, like I sweated less in 4.5 hours than I did in an hour easy-ish interval session. So yeah, I mean, I'm quite shocked, because I really thought I was close to nailing it, and as it turns out, I'm not. But yeah, lessons learned, and that's why I'm working with FlowBio with the S1 to educate people like this, because as you can see, it does vary massively depending on what session you're doing and what temperature you're doing, which moves us on to some news from recording today. John has been in touch with core, the body core temperature peoples, and I'm going to have access to that at the studio. So when we sweat test in the studio, which is now an option, and I'll finish this video off with the advert, there'll also be a link down in the description below to my website where you can see more info and book, or get in touch if you have any questions. But we can now also attach the core temperature monitor, so we can monitor your heat. So when you do a workout and you see the sodium concentration and how much you're sweating and what sodium you need to replace, we can also analyze that data alongside your body temperature, because it's going to change. So, if you're training in Mallorca, if you're going out and doing 3-1-2, the temperature alone is going to massively change how much sodium you need to replace, opposed to riding here in the UK. So, yeah, I thought I was on point, is the moral. I'm not. And I thought it might change a little bit, it might fluctuate, but I mean, we're seeing here fluctuation of like 400 milligrams within an hour session, but then the same amount of sodium loss in 4.5 hours. So, I mean, if I was doing that 4.5 hours at higher intensity, I would be miles off what I have in my bottles. And it just goes to show that it isn't a case of one number does all, because if I stuck to the easy zone 2 ride, yes, I would have been over. I would have had more sodium than I needed for the interval session, but I still would have been miles off for the others, and especially the 4DP test, like I would have been like way over. So, I mean, yeah, the data doesn't lie, and if we ignore the 4.5 hour session, take the hour sessions, I mean, the lowest is 954 milligrams of sodium that I would have needed to replace, and the biggest is 1,600. So that's 600 milligrams of sodium fluctuation within a week, and that's just one training week. And yeah, if you go longer term, it's going to be even more. It's going to change. It changes with your age. It changes with your fitness, how much exercise you do. There's so many factors that affect your sweat and your sodium that it's definitely not a one number and that's the silver bullet. That is it. That's not the case. And that's a good thing with the S1, is that it's not a test. It's more sweat monitoring, and you can wear this on every workout. It goes on your heart rate strap. You don't even think about it. You just start the session, which you can do on the device or on the app, and stop it when you get back, and you can see what you're losing, so you can adapt, especially throughout the year. You can adapt depending on whether you're doing an endurance event, a TT. You can just be a bit more on it, and I've kind of got to eat my own hat, so to speak, and I've been miles off, because if I've gone out for a 3-hour ride before, I've had like 1,000 milligrams in my bottles, like 500 in each, and that would have been miles off. So I need to really knuckle down, and I'm going to continue to use the S1 and see how I go and how it changes with hydrating better. I think hydrating throughout the day is definitely something that is helping. So yeah, I guess it's kind of a non-scientific roundup of the data, but I might in the future give my data to Stefan at FlowBio and do a Zoom call with him, and get him to spin off his findings from my rides and my data, and and I might put that out on social media. So yeah, I'm not a scientist, I'm a cyclist, I'm a coach. It's all new to me, I'm still learning, so I just want to take you with me, and hopefully you can learn with me. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. If you've got any questions, fire away and I'll get back to you. And if you've got anything that you want me to test, or like, you know, I have access to Wahoo components and stuff at the studio, the S1, the core body temp. So there will be more coming, but if there's anything that you want to know or learn or anything, or if you just want to see me ride stupid rides like the 200-mile ride video, yeah, leave it in the comments and I'll get back to you. Bye!
Sweat is actually quite interesting. You have DNA in sweat, you have lactate in sweat, you have cortisol in sweat. So sweat is a pretty sexy bodily fluid.
Sweat is a pretty sexy bodily fluid.
Comes in every shape and size. My symptoms are typically headaches, lethargy, like getting quite tired towards the end of the day, headaches kind of in the middle of the day, feeling like hungover basically. We can dilute dehydration.